Good morning. I'm Chris Tillett, and my role at Palo Alto, you may be wondering, why would Palo Alto be at a competitor's conference? Well, it's because we're both mission-focused, and I've always appreciated the mission that Lima Charlie has been on, and to me, I love my competition. I absolutely do. As a matter of fact, it's kind of the thing that I do is essentially I actually build out and deploy all of my competitors' tools in actual live environments. So I actually have friends that work at all the different places. I've actually built out with Microsoft MVPs, all the E5 and all the Sentinel and all the CoPilots and all that stuff. And then I also interview SOC leaders and take that information back to product. So I kind of sit as a nexus point between sales, marketing, and product. So I learn a lot. I learn a lot each week. And this has been a favorite topic of mine because if you've noticed, I've got a lot of gray hair. I have built and deployed every SIEM on the planet. I've integrated with every single one, and I hated them all. They all suck, okay? They were terrible. This is from ArcSight, this is from Logarithm and Exabeam, and then the rest are just coming as they go. But I just want to let you know, essentially, in 2 months, I turned 50 years of age. So before the summer, I decided to put some physical goals for myself. What do you think of them? Well, wait a minute. You don't think I can dunk a basketball? Now? Yeah, when I was 19, I could. I can't deadlift 1,000 pounds. I do not want to get tackled by an NFL player. I've already been hit too many times as a kid. And my dream of kayaking in the Olympics went away. Couldn't get there. So what do you think I actually did when I sat down and looked at my goals? I said, could I do this by the end of the year? These are reasonable. They're taking into account the human. You guys were able to take a quick look at those goals, take a quick look at this dude and laugh. You saw that they were ridiculous. And what's interesting about me talking to a lot of teams, and I thought Philip brought up a very good point about you all have a plan till you get punched in the face. Believe me, I sit down with people and they map out a dream list of everything they want their SOC to be able to do. And it looks a little bit like this. And they wouldn't know how to get that going if they tried. Because when we look at the SOC, the mistake we always make is we map out a huge list of technical things. I filled out all your RFPs. Yes, I can process semantic logs. Yes, I can do this log. Yes, I can do that log. Yes, it's encrypted on transit. All those little questions that you put in there to make it sound so good. And I love the RFP process for SIEM. It's the same process the military uses to buy stainless steel toilets. You think that's working? You think it's working? You go into a SOC, the analysts are exhausted. The average lifespan is what, 9 months? Our SOCs are run in Santa Clara, California, and Tel Aviv, Israel. You know how expensive it is to replace somebody every 9 months? Again, you could look at this human, you could look at the goals and go, that dude ain't doing none of that. And yet, when we have to look at our team and what are they capable of doing, we need to be realistic with what we're trying to get from the SOC. And really, in reality, what I appreciate about what Phil said is, what are the outcomes you're trying to achieve? Map your way back to that, not a dream and wish list of technical things. I know that sounds crazy for someone to say, talking about SIEM. It's not all about the tech. It's not. It has to be outcome driven. It has to be, how do I make these analysts more efficient? TDIR is fast now. It's got to be fast now. You cannot take an alert and then pivot and query your way to hell. You know, I have customers that have actually taken certain SIEMs out of their SOC because of curious analyst syndrome. They start going down Windows logs, and next thing you know, they're going down the EVT log hell, and they're just looking at different fields. They're not actually solving anything. And when we start getting into some of these identity attacks, and I don't need to create any fear with anyone, but we know how quickly things can be compromised now. It used to be great. You could sit there for 6 hours and query into your SIM and find maybe some odd anomaly that you can then start looking down and going down the road with. But with an identity attack, you've got a couple of hours at most. At most. And so one of the reasons why I think that we're having a problem in cyber, and I saw this at Black Hat, we were discussing that this morning, is one word. Get me a vendor that can explain the difference between analytics, machine learning, and AI. I have one spreadsheet that'll show you. They conflate the term. You know why they conflate the term? Because they don't have it. They don't have it, and they're hoping the CoPilot eventually catches them up. So that's what you saw all through Black Hat, all the marketing. By the way, this is a PJ talk. That's failed marketing. Choose your own F. It's up to you. But you've got to get real. And one of the things we realized is we had what, 10,000 people in 2021 when I joined, and we caught something. And our agent caught it, yay, but it freaked us out. What if it hadn't? We were running like everybody else. We had an upper right quadrant SIM. We had built the data lake of fantasy with putting some logs over here to save some money, and we'll query it when we want to do an investigation. We bought tool for, what, $500 million. But guess what? You can only automate so much if your detections suck. If your detections are slow, then your automation is slow. You can't go running a 36-point playbook on Windows Active Directory controllers if half of them aren't reporting into the SIM. Fix that problem first. Basics. It's kind of like me. I can't sit there and blame my hormones, never get off my butt and work out. At a certain point, you got to get up off your butt. You got to do the work. And so the one thing that we looked at is, how could we have caught this? We had 9 analysts. They were working 18 to 22 cases a day, 100% triage. Could not proactively threat hunt. And oh, by the way, my CEO goes on CNBC and says, we're your cybersecurity partner of choice. My chief product officer at RSA goes, sorry, I had a cold this week, goes, cybersecurity is a solvable problem. That just makes you kind of go, ha. But these are very confident leaders. They've seen what's happened in the world, and they actually know and have a good plan. But again, how will we have caught that? When we were sitting there in just constant triage, just like everybody else. So we said, we've got to change things up. And maybe, just possibly, I'm the problem. Because I'm not willing to change. I did this at this bank, and when I come over, I'm going to bring my same guys, and we're going to do that here. And then I'm going to do that here. You know, right now, there's a small materials manufacturer integrating SAP for HANA. They have 1,500 employees. You know why? CIO came from a large manufacturer, and they're just doing the same playbook, not looking at the team, not looking at the organization, and making an adjustment. That organization is dying under that, dying. And how I know that? My father's leading the charge there. He's still 75 years old, still working on that crap. But it's SAP for HANA for a small org. It just doesn't make sense. Sometimes we're the friction. So we looked at everything and says, what should a SOC do? And this is what we came up with. This was the mission statement for our SOC. If it didn't do this, kick it out. Doesn't matter what it is. Drop the religion. Yes, we know we hired a bunch of these people because they were good at this one SIM tool, but guess what? At the end of the day, it's a schema on read database. They can learn another one. It's not that big of a deal. I mean, I see now some customers, they've got agent religion. They act like if they get rid of this one agent of theirs, they're just going to start crying. It's like, it's an agent, dude. What happens when they're turned off? What's your plan for that? You know, an organization of 400,000 agents, I mean, well, we've got some 400,000 or 500,000 agents. You may have 5,000 to 8,000 that aren't running at any one time. Don't have the right policy, isn't installed. And oh, by the way, the agents on this don't really work. I do 90% of my business here. If you're not bringing the telemetry in, you're not protecting me. Again, we can't have one thing that we want to rely on and hope it solves the problem. So we rebuilt everything. And we looked at it and said, look, if we're going to actually, and so I actually built what's called the magic pain quadrant. And it's the actual pain of running a SOC, things that are extremely difficult to do. And I said, if we're going to go through a SOC transformation workshop, if we're going to transform what we do, the hard stuff's got to be made easier, faster, more efficient. The dumb stuff has got to be automated completely out. We don't have time for dumb stuff anymore. No more. So Palo Alto has grown from 10,000 employees to now 17,000. We had 9 analysts before. We were doing 36 terabytes a day in our SIM. Now we're doing 80 to 100 any one day. How many analysts do you think we've hired in the last 2 years? Just scream it out. 1. We've completely eliminated tier 1. It's gone. Our agents work a 30-30-30 model. They spent 30% of their time on triage, 30% on the time on threat hunting. The other 30% of their time can be on things such as controls and DLP and data class, because data classification with DLP is god-awful. Like vulns and DLP are the last 2 disgusting things in cyber that's got to get fixed. So they spend a lot of that time. And oh, by the way, in the last year, they did 500 SOC tours. But it required us to change the way we thought, to change the way we did it. And so we decided to take this product, and this was, again, I'm just giving you the early examples. We went out to a couple customers and said, hey, do you think this is going to work for you? And so we said, look, let's take a typical account that gets compromised, have it create 3 other accounts for persistence, maybe escalate some privileges, maybe not, and then just sit and chill. How long would you take to find that? This is against their previous stacks, all the customers. Name the SIM, name the EDR, name the UEBA, name all that, all the alphabet soup. And you know, if you take an identity-based attack and it's creating 3 different Active Directory creds, and you're not collecting certain logs or you don't have certain EDR agents, you will not catch that. And most people don't have those logs in their SIM in the first place. They couldn't afford to. They had to prune them out. And oh, by the way, taking that example you gave, Philip, about doing something at 3 a.m., one of these customers, I made sure that I scheduled the call Monday after the Super Bowl. He's a Kansas City Chiefs fan. And I asked him, so you came into work today? He goes, yeah. You could hear it in his voice. Yeah, I came into work. I'm like, now, would you have normally come into work? He's like, I normally never come in the day after the Super Bowl, especially if my team's in it, because it was a miserable existence. They'd get one little indicator. Maybe they see some local admin account be pinched. And then, as you knew, they couldn't afford to put everything in their SIM, so they had to collect some things here. Then they had to go to their SOAR tool, run some automations. Then they had to make sure that those checks were done. Then it could pull more logs in. And so just to do something simple, they'd be in there 6 to 8 hours to start identifying and going, yep, I think this is a problem. Now, this one is even a little more difficult. Because if you're just doing real simple, basic, like old school UBA, you know what your administrators look like? Every day. They look crazy because they're doing something different every day. I live in Richmond, Virginia. So if I'm working on, maybe I'm helping the team in Tel Aviv do an upgrade because it's 2 o'clock in the morning for them, but it's 9 o'clock in the morning for me. But I may never touch that system again, or maybe 6 months. So your ML's got to be very broad. It's got to be very specific. It's got to be souped and unsouped to catch privilege identity attacks very, very quickly. Now, some are going to say, you just conditional MFA everything. Okay. And then watch them go around that security control, much like application whitelisting. Anytime you put a security control in, understand someone's going to game it. as quick as possible. So they may start using local accounts, local service accounts to do their work. So yeah, you might dual MFA them for everything, but then they're going to find their way around it. How about better to actually identify the 2 or 3 admins you need to MFA pop and do that then? Because we like that in cyber, don't we? We like to just, take that peanut butter and slather it on everything, or like that Frank's hot sauce, right? But sometimes we just can't. Sometimes it's not practical. That's what I really appreciated about your approach, Phil, by saying, look, for that individual, we would have shut down that org or that person. We can't do that. So how do we implement the control in a more sensible way? So what we found is that we had to take in all the nice telemetry. When I say nice, network identity cloud endpoint. It's not segregated, it's not different, it's all in one analytics engine. All stitched together to tell stories so that our analysts can focus on the 2 or 3 stories that matter and leave the rest for automation to move forward. And this was probably my favorite thing that I got from them, is I had a friend who's graduating from getting a cybersecurity degree. And I said, hey, if I took this individual and had them sitting in one of your chairs, how long would it take for them to get comfortable, for you to be comfortable with them to answer these 5 questions? Who was involved? What was involved? Is it normal or not? What happened before, during, and after the event, and is the event still ongoing? They could sit in that chair, they could run that entire triage through, and oh, by the way, you don't feel the need to check back up on their work. To all of my initial early customers, they were all saying 6 weeks. I said, I don't believe you, so I made it 8. So that's what's in here. But you can see there's some of these organizations, they were telling me about this painstaking experience of having like slowly but surely releasing panels in their Okta that they could see the next tool so they could learn that tool and things of that nature. And that's why tool sprawl has become sometimes such an issue. I've had a customer where we essentially had 4 different tools. I was only one of them. It was a Japanese bank that we were talking about earlier. And my tool and 3 others had their UIs changed over the weekend. And I'm training into New York City, and my phone is blowing up, and I don't take calls or do work on the train because of the sensitive nature of what we do. And I'm reading about things about my mother that I never knew. And so I finally get in, and I finally, what is going on? Why are you guys so angry? The whole SOC is down. SOC's down. What did you do? So I call my buddies at these other places, and we're looking to make sure the logs are flowing here, and this is doing that, and this is doing that. I'm like, dude, it's all working. Can you show me what you mean by down? The widgets had moved. So if you start thinking about, remember, people have muscle memory for their things that they do. I just had this happen to me in Zoom where they moved the control to the bar, and I finished this hour-and-a-half presentation. I'm sitting there like an idiot, like, where is this thing? But essentially, think about it. A SOC is very much like a factory or a warehouse. So the equivalent of moving those UI elements around is like going into the GM factory where they set the spark plugs, and there's a feel to it. When you set a spark plug, you know it sets in. It's like we changed out the tools. So the feel was different. Just that small thing alone can shut down a factory. Similar to a SOC. So by us consolidating a lot of our tools, we reduced that swivel chair effect and those instances where this UI element had to be memorized because then that was the part of the UI element in this other tool that I use. Then I go to this other UI element, and that's how I do my job. And that's how I memorized it. It simplifies it. So we found, for us and for some of our customers, the simplification was very welcome. And this, to me, was one of my prouder moments, because to hear it across these customers, when we say that we have a hiring crisis in cybersecurity, that we need more people to get in, But we all know the barriers to entry just to even get a job interview, right? So how can we get more and more people in? We got to simplify. It's got to be run more like a warehouse than a factory. If you think about a Amazon worker, they don't show up and sip their coffee and sit down in front of SAP and start querying the master data record. I think I'm going to query this warehouse today. And row L, that's closest to me. I'll just query that one. And shelf 8, that's right there. I don't have to walk very much. So I'll go pick that. When an Amazon worker goes in, a warehouse worker goes in, you're going to go pick this, then you're going to go pick this, then you're going to go pick that. You're going to wrap it up in that box, and you're going to send it out the door. That's the human element. Human side. The people, not the nerd stuff. The nerd stuff you got to have. There's all the basics. And by the way, some of your RFP questions, I wrote them. And I was wrong, so I'm sorry. But anyway, you're welcome. But I think at this point, one of the things I would like to start seeing is people focusing on how much more efficient this will make my analyst. How much faster can we do this? Now, we got to slow down sometimes, and you want to slow down sometimes for certain things. But you don't need to slow down for everything. And if Amazon ran their warehouses the way we run SOX, Amazon would be out of business. It would be. And again, part of the problem. No bully pulpit here. So this is what I tell everyone. How fast is your response? How quickly can you find new things? How quickly can you do certain things? We should always be asking ourselves, is this really the way we should be working? Why are we doing it this way? Because you know who is? It's our adversaries. They're always thinking of a faster, easier way, and we're always having to keep up. So if we're still doing and triaging the same way we were 5 years ago, we're completely lost. Completely lost. So at this point, I'll leave this to any questions. Feel free. You can call me dumb, whatever. I don't care. But feel free to ask any questions. This presentation is for you. Thank you very much for humoring me for a few minutes. But I've got about 5 minutes for questions if anybody has any. That's a great question. So he asked, how do we focus, like if you have a SOC that already has some specific processes and things like that, how do you then, if that's working for them, how do we capture that so that we either build on that or continue to improve on that? Just that way. So one of the things I'll do is in an outcome-based approach is we'll have the outcome and then work our way back. That even helps me even get down into log source selection. Which logs should you have? And then we will look at your playbooks and we may say, you know what? That playbook that's actually pulling these logs here to there to do this, you actually can cut out 4 of those steps. Correlation rules, detection rules, I have a rule for that, similar to what Phil says. It's got to pass the 3 a.m. test. If my Miami Dolphins somehow pull it off and they win the Super Bowl and I'm up celebrating with my family as a long-suffering fan, I'm going to move over those things that I would wake up for 2 hours later after going to bed. Anything else, I would look at, well, maybe we don't need to do it this way. Maybe that was an old way to do it, and that's what everyone got comfortable with. But in reality, this is a much more simple way forward. So a lot of our customers have actually taken advantage of that. Even some of our larger customers, I was really surprised by this one large retailer. They said, you know what? We're going to go with all out-of-the-box content, and then we'll modify from there. And I was shocked because I felt, oh, God, they got 1,000 correlation rules. It's going to be a nightmare. And they was like, no, we're not going to do it. They moved over like a few, but it had to match those criteria. So basically, we made everything match a success criteria. And, again, certain organizations, they're going to have faster success criteria. Other organizations like financial services, insurance, are going to be much more conservative. And they may have regulatory reasons for it. So that's one of the things we have to understand as well. There are some cases where we have augmented their existing SIM. We did not replace. They had certain things. Accenture Accenture they spent like $7 million to get this app thing built. Why blow that up? It just wasn't, that's not helpful to them. We don't have that app thing. If that's working for them and it's solving a specific problem, we'll go in adjacent. We'll take all the dumb stuff, but that app that's working for them for fraud or something like that, just hang on to that. So it's a very balanced way. It's very prescriptive, not so much consultative, but prescriptive. Well, that is my time. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. Feel free to grab me for anything.